But what I had learned through watching Frank Shorter, Bill Rogers, the great Rob D. Costello from Australia running marathons, and I realized that this business of marathon running was about patience. That was the key word, patience. Believe in yourself. I mean, of course, you had to do the training.
Right.
So, of course, for the first time in my life, I didn't race every week. It was like I went into training, and I did 6 months of training. And the great thing about that is that every step, every week, when I wrote in my diary what I had done and the plan that I had, and they matched, and and it wasn't about having a good week this week and a bad week next week. It was about the stepping stones, the pyramid, and that's the principles of the Lydian training is building the pyramid. So I knew that every step I was taking, I was well on. So when I started on the start line, I think you sometimes in those few minutes before the gun goes, you have 1,000 thoughts for every second. But one thing I did know is that this time, more than any other time in my life, I had prepared for the race of my life. That I knew that I could live with the consequences of the result. But I knew that if anybody has prepared better than me,
tip your hat. That's all you can do.
That's what it's going to be. But I knew I was the best prepared I'd ever been in my life. And when I did those time trials, I was going out and running solo 5Ks at 13:40 and 13:45 on the track on my own, but with my friend who would be drinking beer, calling out the split times. I went to, then I knew I had to run 2 hard races, the Virginia 10-miler, and that was when I set the record, which has never been broken to this day.
Your 10-mile record.
Yeah. The Kenyans and all the guys have had a go at it. And then I ran the Boston Freedom Trail and set a record there. And that's when I beat Jeff Smith. And so I knew that I was prepared the best I could be. And so as I got on that plane and it took off, and I was living and training in a place called Flying Hills in Pennsylvania. And for the first time ever, when I'd taken the flight out, it flew out over all the courses, over the forest that I used to train in, all the Amish country, and I'd look down, and I'd just marvel at the fact that, wow, from the air I could see where I used to run, which was those 3.5 hour, 3:45 mile, 3.5 hour runs on a Sunday morning at 90-degree temperatures and about the same humidity, and I just knew that the work had been done. I just had a sense of pride and a self-confidence.
Yeah.
And so when the gun went, and then as I'm going through and splitting off these times, but the leaders are still out of sight, and I just believed in myself. I just believed to run my race. In road racing, that you tended to want everybody else to run your race because then you could control the race and everybody's running your race and you don't get beaten at your own race. You always get beaten at somebody else's race. And so the idea is to try and gain control of the race, whereas the race was out of control because it was
way up the road.
40 seconds up the road.
So when did you first see Jeff Smith?
I saw him about 22, 23, as he just disappeared around the corner. And
but you knew you were catching him?
Yes, I did. The splits that I was getting, because they vary all the time, somebody's got this, and so I tended to rely more on the actual timing equipment, and the guy would be calling out the splits. So then I was doing the math and figuring out that, at this pace that I'm running, and Jeff's running, I'm going to run out of real estate. I sort of, at this rate. So can I run faster? No, I can't run any faster because I'm having some problems.
Yeah.
And I'm just hoping maybe Jeff will slow down for me. And also too, I'm just starting to recognise that in those days, the middle of the road. And I noticed that he's staying with the middle of the road, and as a road racer and a big fan of motor racing, you run the tangents, because that really effectively is the shortest. Yeah. So I started to run the tangents, and it wasn't the fact that I was running any faster, it was just that I wasn't having to run the distance. And so I sort of started to figure out on this side of my brain that if I've got to run another 40 turns and I'm saving 3 or 4 yards per turn, there's 150 meters, and there's about 9, so maybe that's 6 seconds. And then if Jeff gives me 2 seconds, that's 8, and I'm working out per mile, I'm going to get him right on the finish line. And, this is how it was. But what it was is I didn't take him to the 385 yards.
Oh, right, the point 2.
And if you saw the tape, I caught him right on 26 miles.
Right, you did, yeah. And so when you win that race and you're throwing kisses to the crowd and the whole bit, I mean, Jeff basically is getting CPR behind you.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're burying him right there, bringing the shovel out and the whole bit.
Yeah.
But you're totally unaware of what's going on behind you.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the biggest win of your life.
It was. And it was kind of weird because, you'd been chasing the leaders for 26 miles. So I only had a chance to, mind you, it's the only 385 yards you ever want to lead a race. But it was certainly, realizing that I was the first person from Verrazano Bridge to Tavern on the Green.
Yeah.
And that was pretty cool. I thought, I'm first here. Then the fact that I'd won it, and of course, I think there was a lot of emotion and a lot of everything. It was all the things of my life, and everything was there in front of me, and I think that's why I was pretty emotional about the whole thing.
And talk about an event changing your life.
Yeah.
You go back to New Zealand, and what happens?
Well, I can tell you, I was one of the very first runners to carry any decals. Saucony was the shoe company who I had to make my own shoes, by the way. They didn't make them. I told them how to make what I wanted. Pan Am, I had a great relationship with Pan Am, who flew me all around the world. And Pepsi Cola, who had in those days, the Pepsi 10K series. And of course, that was my cash component. So I had a shoe company that made the shoes, and I had an airline that would fly me around the world, and then I had a company that would give me the cash to be able to pay my rent. And so I had these decals on me. And in those days, Rank Xerox would come and offer you $10,000 to wear their shirt during this race. And of course, I got those sort of calls. And I thought, that these other companies have been with me from the inception, from the first day I started running. So I actually made up my shirt myself with these logos and ran the race. And when, of course, what better place, New York City, because Pepsi were in Purchase, New York, Pan Am were in New York, and Saucony were just up in Boston at Cambridge. So it was kind of neat that they shared in all this.
Sure.
And on Monday morning, I was invited to Pan Am after Good Morning America and going to the White House. And to go to a reception at Pan Am, who they had the whole downstairs in their lobby, their ticket area, dedicated to me. And they said later on the next day, when I was flying back to LA, they were going to christen the 747, the Pan Am Clipper Rod Dixon.
They named the plane after you.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet. I like that.
That was pretty cool.
And then you get back to New Zealand, and your daughter's there.
Yeah.
And how old was your daughter at the time?
Emma was 3 years old.
And TV cameras. You're this huge star now.
Yeah.
And what did...
So we were talking about the Olympics were next year in '84. And little Emma ran down and jumped on my lap, and I said, sorry guys, or the media, this is what it is. It's about connecting with your family. And we were talking about the marathon next year, and my daughter Emma said to me, she took the microphone and said she was going to run a marathon with her dad one day.
And the 25th anniversary of New York City Marathon, was that last year?
2008.
2008.
Emma and I stood on the start line in New York City and ran 2 hours and 32.
3 hours and 32.
3 hours. 3 hours. I wish.
I wish. That is great.